we all recognize that decentralization is the way forward. It does not mean that decentralization automatically guarantees good outcomes. After all, the culture we created at the national and state levels has permeated to local governments also. Therefore, there's vote buying there, there's corruption, there's abuse of authority. Let's not be romantic about it. Now, how do you make it actually work for the people? There are two things you must distinguish, urban and rural. Urban is easier because there's a quality of leadership there available. After all, we all live in urban areas, the well-educated people, the taxpayers. There's an awareness that we're paying taxes. And there's a lot of anger that we're not getting the services that we deserve for the taxes that we pay. And there is talent available. There is economy of scale. Therefore, urban India is easier, and that must be the first step. The way forward is large cities create local small ward committees. The Constitution already provides for that. Genuine ward committees empower the local communities as much as is humanly possible with devolution of resources. Otherwise, a 1 crore municipal corporation is too big. It's not decentralization. Very decentralization, 1 crore people. Therefore, as far as the functions can be locally delivered, you try and decentralize so that all the principles of decentralization will work effectively. Second, have a strong system of accountability by two means. A strong citizens' charter system so that if delivery is not there, there's a penalty to be paid to the citizen. And two, an ombudsman system outside the normal government accountability structure as part of the Loksatta Lokpal institutional mechanism, so that an independent authority can actually hold both the bureaucracy and the elected local government officials to account through due process. If you take these safeguards, urban India, within a few years' time, will see a tremendous rejuvenation. Even the political process will be transformed because the people understand that their vote locally has consequences locally. The urban vote is enough to begin the transformation of India. Rural is more complicated. Rural, we have destroyed in a variety of ways. One, rural economy is in doldrums. Two, there's hardly any rural tax paid to local governments. Three, rural local governments are very small and therefore there's no economy of scale. Four, all talent has moved to urban areas. Anybody with ability and talent of necessity has moved to urban areas. Therefore, there's no local leadership also. Therefore, rural, we must conceive it differently. Have a minimum size of 25 to 30,000 population for a conglomerate of villages as a primary unit of local government. The 1.5 million panchayats or whatever is absurd. There is no way any system can provide infrastructure and deliver for 1.5 small units. Make them a much smaller number of larger units. Kerala is a good example. An average size of panchayat in Kerala is 25,000-26,000. Then ensure, unlike in urban areas, which have their own resource base, rural areas don't have, ensure devolution on per capita basis just as the states get from the union, from the states to the local governments on a per capita basis, with devolution of responsibilities and even the salaries to be paid by local governments. And finally, the two elements that I mentioned, namely the ombudsman system and a strong citizens charter system, and leave it to them. Wait for 2-3 cycles, be patient. You will see a dramatic change. I already mentioned some of the elements of the structures required to make local governments effective. Ombudsman system, that means at a district level or a city level, an independent authority under the Loksatta Lokpal umbrella. That means she or he is not accountable to the government of the day, the political government of the day. It's part of the independent structure. With sweeping powers, but with due process to discipline both the government officials and the elected functionaries of local governments with due process. And a citizens' charter. Then there are a few other elements. Fund-based accounting system. That means the citizens locally understand, without the confusion of the verticals, various silos, what is actually happening in their locality. In a ward, municipal ward, for instance, in a large city, unless in the particular ward, what's happening in water supply, in sewerage, in road improvement or something else, if you give them vertical, some data without an understanding of what is happening locally, the citizen's voice will not be felt. Therefore, a fund-based accounting system. a sensible accounting system. And finally, a system of public hearings selectively introduced so that on all basic decisions, particularly allocation of resources, people have choices. People's deliberation actually works. It's called deliberative democracy model. China, autocratic China, actually has deliberative democracy model. They choose citizens on a random sampling basis with a scientific sample. They give all the data. They give all the demands and the funds. And they ask deliberation for not an hour or two, but for several days. And then they're asked to vote. And according to the voting preferences, funds are allocated. If China is doing it, why can't we do it? We are simply resting on our laurels that we have a beautiful democracy, we have the vote, free vote, political parties compete, everything is wonderful. Not true. Not true at all. There's no accountable or deliberative decision making in the country. Bring that in. And then leave it to people. Even now, culturally, if you notice, outstanding things happen in many parts of the country when local governments are given some amount of freedom. Things became worse after the rigidity of the Constitution. After 73rd, 74th Amendments, instead of improving, we actually saw a significant decline because there is a lot of structural rigidity. There is simply no way that the local leadership can make a difference on their own. We killed that. And also leadership continuity is affected seriously because of the way we structure the panchayat reservations. Reservations are necessary in a country like ours. But the kind of model that we adopted meant rotation is mandatory. With rotation, this leadership continuity is missing. And without continuity, no leadership is there anywhere in the world. It becomes a lottery. So if you give structural flexibility to the states, they would have designed their own models. Similarly with the 3 tiers or 2 tiers in panchayats, etc. So a lot of things, with all good intentions, we messed up, made it illiberal, rigid, dysfunctional. The structural rigidity is imposed by the union, unfortunately. That has to be addressed by them. But the rest of the things, the institutional mechanisms, the state can completely create. Telangana state, for instance, recently came up with a slightly altered ombudsman model. It's theoretically not perfect, but still I would say it's a good experiment. They made the district magistrates more or less the ombudsmen of all local governments. Let's see how it works, but I think the idea is very sound. Empower, but hold them to account. Power without accountability is not what we want, whether national or state or local. At every level, empower, but hold them to account. And at the same time, leadership responds differently in different places. Sometimes they have excellent leadership. People are responsive. They get the benefits. Elsewhere, people don't have good leadership. They fail. But there will be comparisons. People will say, why are you doing well? Why are you not doing well here? We're paying taxes here also. They'll automatically improve. If 1,000 flowers bloom, the cost of innovation will be low. The benefits of improvement will be high. And replication becomes easy. First, let us see who are the enemies of local governments. The bureaucracy, the senior bureaucracy, which is secure in a lifetime tenure, which is untrammeled in its power, unaccountable in large measure. They feel elected local government is a nuisance. 2, the elected MLA in the state. Because MLA sees a threat from the local government leaders. There's a competition of the unhealthy kind. Now, given that, if the union government, after all, they are the ones who give the constitutional structure. The union is not worried about MLAs. The state is worried. Therefore, the state, to empower them, may not be that easy. For the union, to simply remove the constitutional hurdles is easier. Because they have no direct link with MLAs and they are not worried about that. They simply can do what Germany has done, for instance. What has Germany done? They made elected local governments with effective authority mandatory. But the structure and other details, they left it to the states. World over, there is not a single country on earth outside of India where the federal constitution decided the design of local governments. India is an extremely sad and dangerous exception. There is not a single example, let me reiterate this. It's absurd for the federal constitution to decide how the detailed design of the local governments is affected. So go back to that. Ensure that they are effective, they are real. The state has no discretion in whether or not to constitute local governments, whether or not to have elections. But the detail, leave it to the state. The second is, even if the legal route is not always easy, the finance commission route, Just as the Union Finance Commission is now transferring with that and other resources, the states are getting about 50% of the total budget of the union government. If you take the tax monies of union government, it comes to 65 to 70%. Most people don't realize it. Total budget includes the debt. Of that, 50% is coming to states, either through constitutional devolution or through other state-specific transfers under so-called centrally sponsored projects or some statutory things, so on and so forth. From the state to local governments is very marginal. You force that. Once money goes, power automatically flows if you design it a little bit here and there. The third is, today I am told the government at the national level is seriously looking at a fundamental reshaping of the executive-legislature relationship. Now, supposing you actually have a system of separation of powers, where the government in the states and at the national level is directly elected by the people, is not beholden to the legislators for their survival. And therefore, legislators cannot interfere on a day-to-day basis in decision-making. Your contracts, your tenders, your postings, transfers, police cases, all these are decided by the legislators locally. That's not what the law intends. We repeatedly talked about rule of law failure. One of the key reasons, apart from the legal system, is the political interference on a day-to-day basis. No government can withstand that. Supposing the government is separately elected, the head of the government, like an American model, then there is no fear of the MLAs. In fact, MLAs will be more than happy to become effective local government leaders. They are not entering the assembly in order to improve the content of debate. They are entering the assembly because they want to be disguised executives. They want to have a share in the executive power. They might as well exercise that executive power at the local level, honestly. Therefore, if you alter the system to that, that becomes much easier. Anyone or a combination of all these routes is possible. In 2010-11, when local elections were held, 78% people voted peacefully, braving the bullets and terrorist threats. It was a resounding verdict in favor of India and Indian democracy. We blew the opportunity. If only we actually followed up with empowering the local governments by merely transferring money to them on a per capita basis, gave them a chance to reshape their lives in their locality. Once they're busy with the schools, the health centers, the roads, the drains, the water supply, they would have forgotten India and Pakistan. That would have been the greatest measure of national integration. Once again, an opportunity, for whatever reason, Article 370 being repealed, they became union territories, the government is looking at it. I'm told also there is now an effort underway to build local governments there, to elect local governments there. Even now, let's not make them perfunctory. Let's actually empower them. And Kashmir is a small state or union territory combination. The total population is only about 1.2 crores or so. If the union government directly, as a special case, transfers, let us say, 1,000 rupees per capita or 2,000 per capita, it's peanuts. It's a small amount. But it will be a greatest measure for integration of Jammu and Kashmir. It will be an excellent example to the rest of the country. We need to do it everywhere. At least in Kashmir, as a special case, if we do it quickly, you will see the results. I'm very certain about it. As I said, in the urban areas, the taxpayers are increasingly restive. And property values are going up. And taxes also going up. And for the first time, people feel the pinch of local taxes. Each of us is paying significant amount of local taxes. And therefore, each of us is actually quite unhappy about, the moment there is a bit of rainfall, there's flooding, mosquito and dengue fever, the drains overflowing, educational care in shambles, etc. So I think there is now a base. If we start with the big cities, urban areas, and in that again, big cities, where there is leadership, the cities are self-sufficient today, city governments increasingly, they're paying taxes. I think the governments will be forced to hear for political reasons. And if the government of India actually looks at the 8 or 10 biggest cities of India, cities with more than 5 or 6 million population, mega cities, for India's economic growth, link it with economic issues, not only political, but also economic growth. If the cities are well managed, India's growth will pick up significantly. About 50% of all the demand for consumer goods in India is in the 8 big metropolis of India. Therefore, the way you manage the cities has profound consequences in terms of economic growth momentum in the country. If the Modi government, which is deeply committed to economic growth, takes this as a big issue and says, even if the whole country's governance structure in terms of local governments cannot be altered overnight, let us create a framework for these 8 or 10 cities. build a consensus around that. I think the economic need of the country at one level, and the growing clout of the urban middle classes who are taxpayers and who are also otherwise vocal and influential, on the other hand, they both give us a tremendous opportunity. If the government is wise, they must at least seize that momentum. And they will see that it will have also long-term political consequences, not party political, but the nature of politics, the entry barrier, the right kind of people entering political life, and then giving their talents to improve the city life and so on and so forth. It will not happen easily in states and the national level. It will happen easily at the local level. If the leadership is wise, there's a tremendous opportunity. The question is focusing on economic growth and certain cities and building some institutional mechanisms is not necessarily politically profitable. And as I said, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu and several other leaders did not always win. My argument is twofold. One, they actually won the elections. Mr. Chandrababu Naidu won the 99 election. Hands down. He was re-elected. 2004, after 10 years of power, 9 years of power, he lost. But his successor pursued the same policies. And he again won 2 successive elections. Take Maharashtra now. But for the political problem of Shiv Sena versus BJP, the alliance won the power again because they tried to build infrastructure there. You can see that happening in many states in the country. Therefore, to say that people are losing when they're taking the right decisions is not entirely true. Second, even when they're taking the wrong decisions for political survival, they're losing hands down. In the last term, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu, he went back on the fundamentals of economic growth and rational decision making and went in for freebies in a big way. But he lost hands down. So it's not that bad policies are making you win either. You might as well do the right thing because that's a long-term struggle we have to fight, because a democracy does not automatically become viable overnight. There'll be some mistakes. There'll be some confusion. It's a period of time that will really clarify the minds. Until 1990s, we all thought licensed art was the normal thing. But today, no citizen of India wants it. No party wants it. Do you wait for a crisis to change direction, in which case you already paid a heavy price? Or do you at least have some sense of the foretaste of what's going to happen, and therefore persuade the people? The art of communication is necessary for politicians. For instance, there was a time when computerization in banks was resisted. There were massive strikes in the country. All political parties stood by the bank employees who were going on strike. Today, will any bank organization come before the people and go on a strike on computerization? The consumers will beat them up. So just because the consumer citizen is not fully aware of the consequences of certain policy framework, if you take advantage of that as organized sector and hold the country to ransom, I don't think it's the right thing. I think the governments must resist it if they're protecting our interests. I think India is coming to that stage increasingly.